Doug Kezirian. He is the host of the Behind the Bets podcast, also Daily Wagers, 6 to 7 on ESPN2. Doug, it's Josh and Jeff back here in the studio. How you doing today?
Guys, good to be with you. Thanks so much for having me. Super Bowl is basically here, right? Wednesday's kind of that day where you really get that vibe. Obviously, I just landed today, so then it really feels like the Super Bowl's here. But I can't wait for kickoff. It's awesome. It's going to be such a good game, I'm hoping at least.
So, Doug, before we get to anything else, we have to ask you about what happened to you earlier today, because you were supposed to be on the midday show today. But we were told, and our audience is definitely curious because they've already broken on the air about 2 hours ago, that you had some issues getting in the building. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I did. You know, look, like any sort of travel plans, there's going to be some miscommunication, especially when you operate under the umbrella of a big company. You just think someone else is handling it. And like, you know, I booked my own flight. I booked my own hotel, corporate card, all that stuff. But I was working with other people, and they were sort of scheduling the radio interviews. I kind of assumed they were doing the credential, but the people who do that don't do the credentialing. My boss was supposed to submit some stuff to our NFL office, who then puts it through the credential. So, I mean, honestly, backtracking, it's on me, to be honest. I should have probably insured it, especially because I've been to Radio Row a few years in a row. So it's just kind of one of those things where I kind of, we learned in grade school when you assume what happens. All
right, Doug. So let's flip it over to the game, because obviously, one of the things that you guys do on the show and on the podcast, which the podcast, no offense to the show, but I think the podcast is actually better than the show personally. That's
really? Okay.
Yeah, well, I enjoy it because of the fact that you get to dive a little bit more deeper sometimes than the show does. So obviously
That's
on TV
fair.
you have a limited amount of time, but I think one of the things that you have brought up on the podcast before is that people look sometimes at certain games differently in terms of betting. And we know that the Super Bowl is one of the most bet-on events of the calendar year. So for you analyzing the Super Bowl in terms of lines and prop bets and everything, do you personally look at it differently, or do you try to be objective and still treat it like any other game?
Well, I think in my old job I had to. When I was calling highlights or doing radio with College Game Day on ESPN Radio for a few years, I did that. It just depends what my role is. Now I'm all in on gambling, so I look at things through the lens of betting. And frankly, I'm supposed to look at things through the lens of betting. Now, when something tragic happens with like the Kobe Bryant passing, you don't say, hey, Kobe covered 64% of the games as a double digit. Like, no one cares. So you have to have like a filter, right, and you have to be human. But when we're talking the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl is about as betting as much as it is about football. And that means it's about prop bets. And it is about, now, am I a complete idiot? No. I try to dive deeper like you alluded to with the pod. But I think it's very interesting, and I'm here on Radio Row not to talk about anything but gambling. And I think it's interesting. I have a background in this. I cover it for ESPN. I've been doing betting content for close to 2 decades, so I don't see how I could look at it any differently than through the gambling lens.
Do you feel like the Super Bowl, because it's such a high profile, that sometimes the bookmakers purposely put out certain angles because they know people are going to bet no matter what?
100%. So the Super Bowl is influenced by public/recreational money more than any other game in any other sport throughout the calendar year. So because of the volume of action, I mean, we're looking at close to in the neighborhood of $400 million legally bet this year across 14 U.S. states. Illegally combined, we're looking at over 6.8 billion, I should say, by American Gaming, a release, study they just released. Now, that's all speculation. Obviously, you can't track it all, but you can track the legal money in those 14 states. And it's just, there's only so much, quote, professional/sharp money that the recreational money outweighs it. So the point spread, the prop bets will all be influenced by the public. And because technology and everything, they know what the public's going to bet on. And it's going to be Patrick Mahomes over passing yards. It's going to be a safety to occur. It's going to be, will there be overtime? Yes. So all those prop bets, they project the behavior and the patterns, the betting patterns of the public from past Super Bowls into the betting lines for every year moving forward.
So then how much do you feel like then...
So, for example, if the odds should be like 11-1, they'll offer 8-1. You know what I'm saying?
So, like, then my next question would be, how has the legalization of gambling then in places like here in New Jersey affected how those lines are made overall? Because, in the past it's just been Vegas. Well, now it's New Jersey and other states involved in the process as well.
So it's a great question, but I think it's the same. That's just my speculation. However, when it's like week 4 Monday nighter and like the Eagles are at home, I think that's when we'll see discrepancy. I think that's when the Jersey books will be heavy on Eagles money, much like we've seen like Oregon-Auburn week, the opener in college football this year. Oregon was a favorite in Oregon books, and Auburn was like -4 everywhere else. We see it in Mississippi with Balak, some of those Beau Rivage and those books with LSU games. So you'll see it when they're isolated games, but when it's the Super Bowl and there's going to be so much money, you might have the regional influence. Like if the Eagles are in the Super Bowl, maybe there's higher liability on the Eagles in those books in Atlantic City. But other than that, I think it's like apples to apples with the Super Bowl.
Hey, Doug, for this Super Bowl, I'm seeing that the Chiefs on most sites tend to be a favor by a point and a half, something like that. And I also see on a prop bet, though, that Patrick Mahomes, you could probably get him at and winning MVP at like plus 105, 110, 115, which is kind of surprising to me. If the Chiefs are the favorite, I would almost think that Mahomes then would be the favorite to win MVP, and I'm surprised that you can get that at a plus number. Is that make sense?
So it's a fantastic question, something we discussed last year with Brady and the Patriots, because, again, the point spread was under 3. Mm-hmm. So Mahomes is the favorite, right? But he's not the odds-on favorite. Odds-on means less than even money. So you have to decide if you like. Okay, let's just backtrack a little bit. There's only been one MVP in Super Bowl history who's won it on the losing team. So it's just not going to happen.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, is it worth the 20, 30 cents to take the Chiefs' money line and not Mahomes' MVP? Because you would think if the Chiefs win that Mahomes is going to get the MVP. Mm-hmm. Last year, it was like minus 115 and like even money, and I said anybody who bets Brady to win the MVP is an idiot. Now, once kickoff approached, Brady went up to like plus 120, but it happened last year. The Patriots won, and Edelman was the MVP. I think there's a chance.
Should have been Gilmore.
Yeah, I think there's a chance Mahomes wins and does not win MVP in a Chiefs win. Now, I think it's likely? No, but I think you need to get like plus 120 for me to bet Mahomes and not bet the Chiefs money line. I would just prefer to play it safe a little bit. But it's a great question, and people need to understand sort of the value and the permutations of certain scenarios and understand the differences of those odds.
Doug Kezirian joining us live from Radio Row in Miami. Follow him on Twitter at Doug ESPN. Again, Daily Wager, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7, ESPN2. Behind the Bets podcast, a podcast that I personally enjoy. You check it out on all the podcasting platforms. Doug, we've been talking a lot about the props and different opportunities. Is there a prop bet that you personally look at and you say, I don't know why there's value there, but that's a must touch?
So it's funny you mentioned that. There's a few that have caught my eye. I did the podcast you guys mentioned. You probably, if you haven't listened to it, you will. Bill Barnwell, colleague of mine, was on the show. And he had a couple that I really liked, and I'm kind of backing, is Breida to win the MVP. He got 200 to 1 in Vegas. I've seen it 100 to 1, even 50 to 1 at Caesars. Look, Tevin Coleman's hurt. And we know Mostert was great. But Shanahan tends to ride the hot hand. And if they're down, they tend to throw more to Breida, who's got wheels, and there's a chance Breida becomes the featured back. If he's having like a good game, he's on a hot hand, Shanahan's not going to go away from it. Mostert's not this like bell cow all season, like maybe Todd Gurley was last year with the Rams, although he didn't have a great Super Bowl. So I would say Breida at MVP if you're looking at 100 to 1. Now, more realistic outcomes, I think Juszczyk over 10.5, 11.5 receiving yards. I think the linebackers of the Chiefs are their weak spot. So I think Shanahan and Andy Reid are both excellent play callers. They'll exploit mismatches. They'll have some wizardry under their on their play sheets. So I think Juszczyk over. I like Blake Bell over receiving yards as well. I think the Belldozer catches a ball for 2 or more yards. Those caught my eye. I'm leaning under in the game, but I don't think it's that fun to bet under Mahomes because people in the AFC Championship game certainly learned that the hard way.
Well, I'm currently the site I'm looking at, Doug, has 80% of the bets taking the over in the game. So, you know, if you're going to subscribe,
well, that's why the number's gone up, right?
Right. The number keeps going up because people keep betting the over. So, is there a number that you suggest to people? Look, if it gets to this number, just stop betting the over.
Yeah, I think 55. I think that's my. I like the under. I'm trying to get 55 and have 56. I think 56 is the under I would take.
So, Doug, if you think
I also look at everything through the live betting lens. I mean, you can always play out of stuff and have a portfolio, so to speak. So I think there's ways to do that and be smart about it.
If you think that the Niners are going to win this game, Doug, in kind of a shootout variety, and a lot of people do think if the Niners win, they're going to have to outscore the Chiefs, I think you'd have to like Garoppolo at, plus 225 in the MVP voting because Kittle has never had more than one touchdown in a game in his life. So it's unlikely he's going to have 2 or 3. And again, it might be a running back, but I would just have to think even a running back has a good game. If Garoppolo wins this game and outduels Pat Mahomes, he's going to get MVP. All he's got to do is throw maybe 2 touchdowns to do so.
I'm right there with you, and actually Westgate has plus 350.
Wow.
So there's a lot of options out there. So I think there's a great value play there. I think what Garoppolo's had to do in the postseason is more a byproduct of just how bad the defenses they faced were stopping the run. So I don't think it's like he's incapable of throwing. I mean, we saw what they did at New Orleans earlier this year. They won that shootout. Garoppolo was great. 349 through the air, if I remember correctly. So I think you can get a quarterback, which usually wins the award, a quarterback at plus 350 of a coin flip game. I think you have to grab it.
You like that over at 54.5? I mean, it seems like a lot of.
I do not. I like the under.
Okay.
I like the under. I wouldn't play the over. I would wait for the number to go up, and then I'd take the under.
All right, follow him on Twitter at Doug ESPN. Doug, where is the Daily Wager podcast being hosted at down there?
So I'm only here for a day, actually.
Okay.
So I flew in this morning. I fly back tomorrow. We taped yesterday. We had Chris Berman, the Swami with a pick.
Nice.
He's on the pod, talking a lot of kind of gambling history and like the Swami evolution. Also Bill Barnwell, like I mentioned, we also have an odds maker as well. Pretty in-depth pod. We got it out on Tuesday, so still plenty of time to listen.
Again, Behind the Bets podcast, Daily Wager on ESPN. Doug Kezirian joining us live from Radio Row. Doug, appreciate the time and glad you finally got in the door.
Thank you. You and me both, buddy.
Again, that's Doug Kezirian. So it was great to chat with him. And, Jeff, I know you're one of the co-hosts of the All In podcast. You, Mike, and Ryan do that each week. So I kind of wanted to get your little reaction from some of the things that Doug said there, kind of in the aftermath.
No, I liked his explanation of why you wouldn't want to take, Patrick Mahomes or the Chiefs' money line in that regard, much like what happened last year with Brady. I think he's smarter than me on this stuff, so I was surprised that he likes the under, although I understand why he'd want to say take the under when you wait for the line to go up a little bit. So
I thought it was interesting, though, because he also said the number that he would be scared of most is if it got above 56.
Right.
He says that's the number where he would tell people stop betting the over.
Yeah, I agree with him on that. So it'll be interesting to see if that line moves as we get closer to the game.